My name is Amber Dawson. I'm 34 years old, and the strangest morning of my life began with a phone call from my sister telling me that our father was dead, while my father was sitting 3 feet away from me, stealing bacon from my plate. It was 6:30 in the morning. I was drinking coffee in my kitchen when my phone rang. It was my sister Simone. I answered and put the call on speaker. Before I could even say hello, her cold voice came through. "Amber, Dad died last night." I froze. My hand stopped halfway to my coffee cup, because across the table, sitting in his old chair, was my father, Moses Dawson. Alive, drinking coffee, and reaching for another piece of my bacon. I looked at him in shock. He looked back at me. "What happened, kiddo?" I didn't answer, because my sister continued. "He left everything to me and Brayden." A pause. "You get nothing." Then I heard my brother-in-law laughing in the background. "Finally, you're out." That was the moment I realized this wasn't a phone call about my father's death. It was a message, a warning, a celebration. But Simone didn't know one thing. My father was listening, and what he did next would change everything. 9 months earlier, my life was completely different. I was a registered nurse. My job took me to different hospitals across the country. My father always teased me about it. "You travel thousands of miles to take care of strangers," he would say. "But you still forget to call your old dad." That was Moses Dawson. A simple man. A hardworking man. He served in the army when he was young, then spent decades fixing cars in his small-town garage. He wasn't wealthy, but he owned his house. He had no debt, and everyone respected him. After my mother Carol passed away, my father became quieter, but he kept going. Every week he took care of the little things my mother loved, including her old brass clock on the fireplace. She always said, "A stopped clock makes a house feel empty." My father never forgot those words. Every Sunday he called me, we talked. We laughed, we were close, until one accident changed everything. One afternoon, my father climbed a ladder to clean his gutters. He was 73 years old, but he still believed he could do everything himself. The ladder slipped, he fell 8 feet. Luckily he survived, but he broke his wrist and needed surgery. I was working out of state when I got the news. I immediately flew home. When I arrived at the hospital, Simone was already there. She looked worried. Her husband, Brayden, was standing beside the doctor, acting like he was in charge. Brayden was the kind of person everyone trusted at first. Always smiling, always saying the right words. He looked at me and said, "Amber, don't worry. We've got everything handled. Family takes care of family." At that moment, I believed him, because he was my brother-in-law, because she was my sister, because they were family. Before leaving, I asked questions. Who would take Dad to appointments? Who would manage his medication? How would his recovery work? Every answer came from Simone. "We've got it. Don't worry about Dad. You're so far away." My father smiled from his hospital bed. "Go back to work, kiddo." "I'm fine." I wanted to believe him, so I returned to my job. But I didn't know that while I was away, my sister and her husband were slowly taking control of my father's life. Dad moved into Simone and Brayden's house. They said it was temporary, just until his wrist healed. Then Brayden suggested some paperwork. He told my father, "This will just make paying bills easier." It was a power of attorney. At first it seemed normal. My father trusted them, why wouldn't he? They were family, but after that day things started changing. My Sunday calls became different. Before, Dad always answered. Now Simone answered. "He's sleeping. He's tired. I'll tell him you called." Days turned into weeks. I bought my father a new phone. I set everything up myself. I saved my number. I sent it to Simone's house. The package disappeared. I sent another one. It showed delivered. But my father never called. When I asked Simone, she said, "Oh, Dad doesn't want it." I knew that wasn't true. My father rebuilt an entire truck by himself at 70 years old. He wasn't afraid of technology. Something was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong. Christmas came. I flew home because I needed to see my father. When I entered Simone's house, I saw him sitting quietly in the corner. The man who used to tell stories for hours was now silent. "Dad," I said. His face lit up. For a moment, I saw the old Moses. But then he looked toward Simone and became quiet again. I waited until we were alone. "Dad, are you okay?" He looked outside, then whispered, "My checkbook has been on a diet, kiddo." I knew he wasn't joking. "What do you mean?" He sighed. "Brayden handles everything now. I haven't seen my statements in months." My heart sank. "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" He looked hurt. Because they told me you were too busy. They said your career mattered more than your family. I couldn't believe it. They had been lying to both of us. I went inside and calmly asked Simone, "Can we sit down and talk about Dad's finances?" Before she answered, Braden appeared. "Why?" "Because he's our father," I said. He smiled. "Family doesn't need lawyers." The strange thing was, I never mentioned lawyers, but he did. That told me everything. He wasn't worried about helping Dad. He was worried about being questioned. I returned to work. But I couldn't forget what happened. Then, months later, I received a phone call from an old nurse friend named June. Her voice sounded serious. "Amber, do you have a father named Moses Dawson?" "Yes." "Amber, he's here." I felt my heart stop. "What do you mean?" "He's at Cresthaven Manor, a nursing home." I couldn't breathe. Nobody told me. Not Simone, not Braden, nobody. How long has he been there? June paused. "Months." Then she said something I will never forget. "Amber, he doesn't seem like a man who was placed here. He seems like a man who was abandoned." I drove there immediately. When I entered the nursing home, I saw him. My father, sitting near a window. Thinner, older, but still my father. The moment he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. He looked at me and said, "Took you long enough, kiddo." Those words broke me, because I realized the truth. They didn't just hide him from me. They made him believe I abandoned him, and they made me believe he was okay. I sat beside him and listened. "The phone I sent?" Simone took it away. "My letters?" He never received them. When he asked questions, they told him, "Amber knows." She agreed. He believed them, because he trusted his family. Then my father reached into his wallet. Inside was a small piece of paper. My old phone number, written by him. "I knew one day you would find me," he said. That was the moment I made a promise. I would find out exactly what they had done. And I would make sure everyone knew the truth. The next morning, I helped my father leave the nursing home. Before we left, I asked the administrator one question. "Does my father have any medical condition that says he cannot make his own decisions?" The administrator checked the records, then looked at me. "No." I waited. "No dementia?" "No." "No mental incapacity?" "No." My father was completely capable. He wasn't confused. He wasn't helpless. Someone had simply taken advantage of his trust. And that person was my own sister. I brought Dad to my apartment. It wasn't a big place, but it was safe. For the first time in months, he slept peacefully. The next morning, he looked at me and said, "Kiddo, I need to know what happened." So we went to the bank. My father sat across from the employee and asked for every statement, every transaction, every document. He wanted the truth. The bank worker printed everything. Pages and pages. My father put on his glasses and started reading. At first, he was silent. Then his hands stopped moving. "Amber? What?" He looked at the papers. $187,000. I felt my stomach drop. "What about it?" "That's how much is gone." We started going through the transactions one by one. Some payments were labeled as care expenses, but the numbers didn't make sense. Then we found a large transfer, $89,000, sent to a company called BV Capital LLC. I looked at Dad. "BV?" He nodded slowly. "Braden Boss." My chest tightened. The man who said he was helping my father was taking his money. Then we found another payment, $52,000, connected to a loan for a Florida condo. The same condo Simone and Braden bought. The same place they always called their future investment. My father stared at the page. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. That would have been easier. Instead, he became quiet. And I knew my father. Quiet meant he was hurt. "They didn't just take my money," he whispered. "They took my trust." But then we found something worse. A home equity application against the Maple Ridge house. My parents' home, the place where my mother raised us. The place my father spent decades protecting. The amount requested? $150,000. And at the bottom was a signature. My father's signature. Except, it wasn't his. Dad looked at it for a long time, then said, "That's not my handwriting." We contacted an attorney named Patricia Whitfield. She specialized in protecting elderly people from financial abuse. She listened carefully. She looked through every document. Then she said something I'll never forget. "People like this rarely start with a crime. They start with a favor." And she was right. First, it was helping with bills, then managing accounts, then controlling everything. Slowly, the person helping becomes the person controlling. Patricia reviewed the paperwork. Then she found another document. A second power of attorney. This one gave Braden complete control over my father's finances. Dad looked confused. I never signed this. Patricia looked at the date. January 12th. She immediately checked Dad's medical records. That day, my father was at a clinic. He was receiving treatment. He was under sedation. The records proved he was there for hours. But this document claimed he signed papers somewhere else at the exact same time. It was impossible. A person cannot be two places at once. My father looked at the fake signature. Then he looked at his real one. His old army papers. His house documents. His personal records. The difference was obvious. The fake signature looked too perfect. Too careful, like someone was trying too hard. My father touched the paper. Then quietly said, "Dead men don't sign papers." I looked at him. "What did you say?" He looked at me. They treated me like I was already gone. That night, my father sat at my kitchen table, the same place where Simone would later call and say he was dead. He looked tired, but there was something else in his eyes. Determination. Amber. "Yes, Dad?" "They took my money. They took my home. But the worst thing, they took my voice." I didn't say anything, because I understood. This wasn't only about money anymore. It was about dignity. Patricia explained that we could fight legally, but it would take time. A long court battle, and people like Braden used time as a weapon. They would delay. They would deny. They would pretend to be innocent. Then my father said something unexpected. Let them believe they won. I looked at him. What? He smiled. People show their true faces when they think nobody can stop them. The plan was simple. We would not create fake documents. We would not break any laws. We would just let Simone and Braden believe my father was gone. Because greedy people become careless when they think the prize is already theirs. My father contacted his old friend Earl Prescott. Earl had known him for decades. When Earl heard everything, he was silent. Then he said, "Moses, I've helped many families say goodbye. But I never expected to help a man attend his own funeral." My father smiled. Maybe it's time for something new. A memorial gathering was planned at the VFW hall. The whole town would be there. The people who knew Moses Dawson. The people who knew his character. And the people who would see the truth with their own eyes. When Simone received the news, she didn't ask if Dad was in pain. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't ask where he was. Her first question was, "What happens to the house?" That was the moment my father closed his eyes. Because he finally knew. The daughter he loved had been waiting for his death. Not because she missed him. Because she wanted what he left behind. The day before the memorial, Simone posted a picture of my father online. She wrote, "Rest peacefully, Daddy. I was with you until the end." People filled the comments with sympathy. They called her a wonderful daughter. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know my father was sitting in my apartment, alive, watching everything. The next morning, my father put on his old dark suit. He fixed his tie, polished his shoes. Then he looked at himself in the mirror. "Ready?" I asked. He smiled. "Kiddo, I've been ready since the day they thought they buried me." And on Sunday afternoon, my father walked toward the place where everyone thought they were saying goodbye to him. But they had no idea. The man they came to mourn was about to walk through the door alive. The VFW hall was full that Sunday afternoon. People from the town came to remember Moses Dawson, his old army friends, his neighbors, people who had known him for decades. At the front of the room was a picture of my father wearing his military uniform when he was young. Beside it was a closed casket, and around it, lilies, the same flowers my mother hated. My father looked at them before entering. He smiled slightly. "Your mother would have complained about these?" I smiled. She definitely would. For a moment, everything felt normal, like we were just attending another family event. But we both knew the truth. This wasn't a funeral. It was a trap. Simone arrived wearing black. She looked exactly like a grieving daughter. People hugged her. They told her how sorry they were. They told her how lucky Moses was to have a daughter who cared for him. Every compliment hurt. Because they didn't know what happened. They didn't know she had hidden him. They didn't know she had cut him off from me. They didn't know the man they were mourning was standing only a few rooms away. Alive. Watching. Waiting. Braden walked in beside her. He looked confident. Almost too confident. Under his arm was a folder. The same kind of folder he always carried when he wanted people to believe he was in control. He wasn't there to remember my father. He was there for the documents. The money. The house. The inheritance. Earl stood at the front of the room. He looked around at everyone. Then he spoke. Before we share our memories of Moses, the family would like to say a few words about his final wishes. I knew exactly what was coming. Braden walked toward the microphone. He opened the folder, and he smiled. A smile from a man who believed he had already won. Everyone here knows Moses was a family man, Braden said. He always wanted to protect the people he loved. People listened quietly. Then Braden pulled out a document. A will. My heart started beating faster. Moses signed this document before his passing. He looked around the room, and according to his wishes, he left everything to Simone and me. The room became silent. Nobody moved. Nobody expected that. Then Braden continued. The house on Maple Ridge Road. The bank accounts. His truck. Everything. I watched the faces around the room. Confusion. Shock. Because everyone knew my father. They knew how much he loved me. They knew something didn't feel right. Then Braden said the sentence he would regret forever. And to Amber, he looked toward the crowd. She receives nothing. A few people looked uncomfortable. Then he added, Moses made that decision for reasons she knows. That was the moment. The moment he thought he had destroyed me. But he didn't know something. My father was listening. And he was about to answer. Patricia stood quietly in the back of the room. She opened her briefcase. Inside were the real documents. The real truth. She waited. Because she knew something important. People like Braden always talk too much. They don't stop when they should. They keep explaining. They keep proving their own guilt. Braden held the fake will proudly. Then Earl asked calmly, Braden, may I ask something? Braden smiled. Of course. The date on this document. He looked down. April 20th. Earl nodded. Interesting. Why? Because according to records, Moses was living at Cresthaven Manor at that time. The room became quiet. Braden's smile disappeared for a second. Only a second. Then he recovered. He was confused at that time. Patricia stepped forward. Actually, he wasn't. Everyone turned. She walked slowly toward the front. Mr. Dawson had no diagnosis showing he was unable to make his own decisions. She placed papers on the table. Medical records, bank records, legal documents, one by one. Braden looked nervous. Patricia continued. The power of attorney you used to control Mr. Dawson's finances was not valid. She looked at the crowd. Because the signature was false. A wave of whispers moved through the room. Simone looked at Braden. What is she talking about? But Braden didn't answer, because he knew. Patricia picked up another document. This document claims Mr. Dawson signed on January 12th. She paused. However, medical records show he was at a clinic that morning. He was under sedation. He could not have signed this document. The room was completely silent. Everyone was listening. Everyone was watching. Then Patricia revealed the bank records. Over $187,000 was taken from Mr. Dawson's accounts. People gasped. Money transferred to companies connected to Braden Voss. Simone's face changed. Not sadness. Fear. Because she realized the truth was coming out. Braden started shaking his head. This is ridiculous. This is a family misunderstanding. But nobody was looking at him the same way anymore. Because they had seen something. The same thing my father had seen. They weren't dealing with a misunderstanding. They were dealing with betrayal. Then Earl walked toward the microphone. He looked at the crowd and said, There's one more person who should be here today. The side door behind the stage opened. Everyone turned. At first, nobody understood. Then a man stepped forward. Dark suit. Straight posture. Walking slowly. But confidently. The room froze. Someone dropped a cup. A woman covered her mouth. Because everyone recognized him. Moses Dawson. The man they thought was gone. The man they thought they had buried. Walking into his own memorial service. Alive. Simone stood up. Her face turned completely pale. Dad. Her voice disappeared. Braden stepped back. The folder in his hand suddenly felt much heavier. My father walked toward the microphone. He looked around the room. Then he looked directly at Braden. and calmly said, "Dead men don't sign papers." A silence filled the room. Then my father looked at his daughter, the daughter who announced his death, and said, "You buried the wrong man." The room was completely silent. Everyone was looking at my father, the man they thought was gone, the man they had already divided his belongings between themselves. Moses Dawson stood in front of them, alive and stronger than anyone expected. Braden was still holding the fake will in his hand. But now it wasn't a document that gave him power. It was evidence. Braden was the first one to speak. "This is a trick." His voice was different now. The confidence was gone. "This is some kind of setup." My father looked at him calmly. "No, Braden. This is what happens when the truth finally gets a chance to speak." Patricia stepped forward. She placed the real documents beside the fake ones. "The difference is simple," she said. "One set was created to protect Mr. Dawson. The other was created to control him." She showed everyone the original house papers, the real bank statements, the medical records, the revoked power of attorney, everything. There was nowhere left to hide. Simone started crying. But this time nobody knew if the tears were real. "Dad, I can explain." My father looked at her, and for a moment I saw the pain in his eyes. Because no matter what happened, she was still his daughter. "I spent my whole life protecting you," he said quietly. "I fixed your car when you were young. I paid your bills when you needed help. I stood beside you." His voice became heavier. "But you couldn't even stand beside me when I needed you." Simone lowered her head. "I made mistakes." My father nodded. "Yes, everyone makes mistakes. But a mistake is forgetting a birthday. A mistake is saying the wrong thing." He looked at the folder in Braden's hand. "This was a choice. Braden tried one last time. Moses, listen to me. We were going to fix everything." My father looked at him. "You had 7 months. 7 months to tell me the truth. 7 months to bring me home. 7 months to stop." He paused. "But you were too busy planning what would happen after I was gone." Then the doors opened. 2 officers walked into the hall. The room became even quieter. Patricia had already contacted authorities before the memorial. Not for revenge, for justice. The officers approached Braden. "Mr. Voss, we need you to come with us regarding financial fraud and forged documents." For the first time, Braden had nothing to say. No speech. No explanation. No deal. The man who always controlled the room finally lost control. As Braden walked away, my father watched him. Not with anger, with disappointment. And somehow that was worse. "You had my trust," my father said. "That was worth more than my money." Simone was not arrested that day, but her life had changed forever. The truth was out. The town knew. The people who once praised her now knew what happened. She had to face the consequences of her choices. After everything was over, my father and I went back to Maple Ridge. The house felt different. Quiet. Empty, but still alive. My father walked to the fireplace. There was the old brass clock my mother loved. It had stopped months ago. He picked it up, fixed the hands, and started winding it again. Tick, tick, tick. The sound filled the room. "It's funny," he said. "Your mother always said a stopped clock makes a house feel dead." I smiled. "And now?" He looked around. "Now it feels like home again." A few weeks later, Dad changed everything. He removed every old power of attorney, updated every document, created a living trust. Not because he stopped trusting people, but because he learned something important. Love and paperwork are not the same thing. You can love someone and still protect yourself. My father also started visiting the VFW every week. He and Earl created a small meeting called Papers While You're Breathing. They taught older people how to protect themselves, how to read documents, how to understand their finances, how to make sure nobody could steal their voice. Because my father knew something, money can be replaced. A house can be rebuilt. But when someone takes away your ability to choose, that hurts the deepest. As for me, I stopped traveling for work. I took a permanent nursing position closer to home. Every Sunday I visited my father. And every Sunday he stole bacon from my plate. Just like he always did. One morning I looked at him and laughed. "Dad, you know you have your own food, right?" He smiled. "Your bacon tastes better. Some things never change." My father once told me, "The strongest people aren't the loudest people. They're the ones who stay calm when everyone else thinks they have already won." And that's what he did. He didn't scream. He didn't fight with anger. He simply let the truth walk into the room. Alive. Because sometimes justice doesn't come with revenge. Sometimes it comes with a quiet man opening a door, walking into the place where people buried his name, and reminding everyone, you can take someone's money. You can take their home, but you can never take their voice, unless they give it away.